Yo, what's up everybody? How is it going? And welcome to this new video about Oko the Broko. So, I'm kind of trying something today, and I would really like it if you could tell me if you like this. What I did is I put together a presentation on something that's happening in the competitive gaming space. Now, I personally keep track of competitive gaming across the board. I love esports, I love competitive gaming in general, and I just kind of keep track of everything. So this right here is something that's currently happening in the Magic the Gathering community, and I thought it was really interesting. What happened is I was talking to Mickey, right? And I kind of explained Oko the Broko to her. And she thought it was interesting. But then I realized she doesn't give a shit about Magic. So I thought I could maybe do that same kind of, presentation to you and just kind of like tell you what it's about. So I put together like an actual presentation. When I was talking to Mickey, I didn't have like an actual presentation. I had my board back there, right? And I want to tell you about Oko the Broko, which is the current drama in the Magic the Gathering community. It is fascinating, and so let me take you on a bit of a journey. What is Oko the Broko? This right here is Oko the Broko. Oko the Broko, Oko, Thief of Crowns, is a Planeswalker that was released in the last expansion of Magic the Gathering, called Throne of Eldraine. Oko was kind of the poster boy for Throne of Eldraine. Everybody was looking forward to him, and he was also the card that was heavily advertised. Wizards of the Coast, the creators of Magic the Gathering, they're heavily pushing Oko, and we're heavily, trying to get people to buy packs specifically to get Oko and his 16 pack or whatever he's got. Now, I'm not really going to talk about Oko's power level right now. We'll do that a little bit later. But this is what we're talking about. So this is the card we're talking about. This is Oko, Thief of Crowns, and this is what all of this is about. Now, the community is currently in a frenzy. They are creating memes like crazy. They are completely freaking out at the idea of Oko being allowed to be in the game any longer, and they want him to be banned. But people are losing hope. So what they're doing is, naturally, again, they are memeing and memeing and memeing. This, by the way, is my favorite meme. I love this one. Oko Thief of Crowns completely takes over the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Metagame. Because this is what has happened in the Magic the Gathering metagame, where Oko has completely taken over it. But I will explain. Bear with me. So anyway, again, Oko's Broko can offer you a nice elk in this trying time. Yeah, the memes are plentiful, they are hilarious, but they are meant to be a voice of concern because people are worried about what Oko represents. Oko is a Planeswalker, so we need to talk about Planeswalkers. And I'm going to go ahead and explain to you how Planeswalkers work. In Magic the Gathering, you have different card types. You have instants, sorceries, creatures, artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers. Now, planeswalkers are put on the board as a kind of a target. Now, in Magic the Gathering, when you attack, you have to declare what you're attacking, right? And you can only attack an enemy player or an enemy planeswalker. So the planeswalkers are kind of considered to be like their own players, if that makes sense. Now, generally speaking, planeswalkers are often seen as win conditions. So this right here is Vivien Reid. Vivien Reid was considered to be a pretty strong planeswalker, right? Very much viable, very much powerful. And she was, part of the metagame. And I think she's a perfect example of how most planeswalkers work and how they're supposed to work. So you can see in the bottom right corner right here. This is her health, or loyalty as it's called. Every planeswalker enters the battlefield with a certain amount of loyalty. Once that loyalty reaches 0, the planeswalker is defeated and goes away, right? Goes into the graveyard. Now, planeswalkers have so-called loyalty abilities. You have a +1 right here, a -3, and a -8. Once a turn, you can use one of these loyalty abilities. Now, the +1 gives Vivien Reid 1 additional loyalty and has an effect. The -3 takes away 3 loyalty and has an effect, and the -8, again, takes away 8. Now, you do need to have 8 loyalty to actually use the -8. You do need to have -3 to use the -3. So this is the basic idea behind them. The Planeswalkers have their own life pool that they can build up or that they can reduce to use powerful effects. Enemies can deal damage to them, either by attacking or using, instants or sorceries, like spells, right, to deal damage to them. And then if they ever drop to 0 life or 0 loyalty, then they die. Generally speaking, Planeswalkers are structured in the way that the +1 effect they have will give you a little bit of value. They will put you towards, push you towards a victory. So in Vivian Reed's effect, or Vivian Reed's case, you can see the +1 gives you kind of insight into the top 4 cards of your library, right? And you can kind of like pull one out, and it's just card draw. In of itself, this isn't going to win the game, but the important thing here is that it's just something that when your opponent lets you have it, then it slowly starts winning you the game over time. Then oftentimes they will have something that lets them defend themselves. So in Vivian Reed's case, she has a -3, which says destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. So she can just kind of shoot a thing, get rid of something, you can get value that way. And then oftentimes their -8, which is often also called their ultimate, will have a game-winning effect. So in Vivian Reed's case, it makes it so that all of your creatures for the rest of the game, this is an unremovable permanent effect, are now indestructible, meaning, well, they can't be destroyed, have vigilance and trample on +2/+2. They become monsters, right? They are absolutely insanely powerful. And honestly speaking, if you ever get this -8, I would say your win rate goes up to like 99%. You win most of the time if you reach that point. So this is kind of how Planeswalkers work, right? They use their +1 to generate a little bit of value. Your opponent has to keep them below the ultimate. If they do ever get to the ultimate tends to win you the game. And then they also have something that allows them to kind of interact with the board a little bit. This is the basic design behind the Planeswalker. You can immediately use one of these effects when the Planeswalker enters the battlefield, and that is very much intentional, right? So Vivian Reed usually will enter with 5 loyalty, then shoot a thing, go down to 2, or get +1, be at 6, and lets you draw a card. So that's the basic idea. You may also notice Vivian Reed right here costs 5 mana. Well, if you aren't familiar with Magic, maybe you haven't noticed. But she costs 5 mana. Oh, come on, dude. All right, let's go ahead and reload my slides really quick. Thank you. I don't know what happened there, but all right, don't worry too much about it. So she has a mana cost of 5 mana. So it's not the easiest to immediately play her. This right here is Jace the Mind Sculptor. This is another Planeswalker. Jace the Mind Sculptor was banned for a very long period of time. Jace, when he was in the metagame, completely took over the metagame, was one of the strongest cards just in the game, like absolutely insane. All right, you may notice he has 4 abilities, but you can still see the basic idea behind Jace here, right? Or behind Planeswalkers in Jace. First, Jace costs 4 mana, so still pretty mana heavy, right? 4 mana, 5 mana is pretty, is a lot in Magic the Gathering. Then the +2 effect is something that lets you slowly build an advantage. Then he has got a 0 effect where his loyalty stays the same, but it's something that again lets you build a little bit of an advantage. Then he's got a -1 that lets him fight, and then he's got some -12 as an ultimate that lets you win the game, right? Is pretty straightforward. And he starts with 3. So in a lot of situations, Jace comes down and will then use, like the +2 or the 0. So he'll go either to 5 or to 0. But he'll be in that general range of 3 to 5 health. All right. So this card, I do want to be clear, Jace was overpowered. This is not debatable. Jace was absolutely insanely overpowered. And he was banned for good reason. He should have been banned. He recently got unbanned because he's now in a new format where he's actually reasonable. But at the time, this guy needed to go. This is where we kind of start talking about Teferi. So Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, was a card that was also a little bit of a kind of metagame fiend. Now, Teferi never got banned, and Teferi was a card that was very powerful when he was being played. So Teferi, 5 mana Planeswalker again. You can still see the same pattern of something that generates value, something that helps him defend himself, and then something that helps you win the game. What made Teferi really powerful is just the effects he had are very, very good, and then he worked well in a general deck. Now, Teferi wasn't really a problem, but I want to point one thing out, that Teferi had 4 loyalty plus 1, right? So he's got 5 loyalty overall. You may notice that a lot of this is kind of floating around this 5 loyalty mark. This is very common, right? Now, Teferi was very powerful, but he wasn't something that needed to be banned. Then they released Small Teferi. This right here is another Teferi that is still playable right now. So this Teferi is a 3 mana Planeswalker. Now this guy is immediately different because he costs 3 mana. You may immediately notice that. Also, he only has 2 abilities. He's missing an ultimate, right? But yet again, he's kind of very similar. Instead, he has a passive, which is a powerful passive. And then he has one thing that lets you, kind of like have a little bit of an effect going on. And then something down here that is kind of removal and lets you build an advantage. So point being that this card was also very, very good, but again, had 5 loyalty. So because these Planeswalkers were so powerful, Wizards of the Coast decided to print this card. Fry. Fry deals 5 damage to target creature or Planeswalker that's white or blue. You may notice white or blue. Well, Teferi, Time Reveler, white and blue, right? Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, white and blue. 4 plus 1, 5 dice to Fry. 4 plus 1, 5 dice to Fry. This was the idea behind Fry, right? These Planeswalkers were kind of taking over the metagame a little bit, and they were really, really powerful. So they added in Fry to kill the Planeswalkers. That's what it did. It just shoots a Planeswalker that's white or blue, right? And just kind of like kills them. Makes it can't be countered, making it very reliable, right? And because most Planeswalkers can't really go above 5 loyalty right away, this was a very good way of dealing with them. And now we can talk about Oko Thief of Crowns. So, Oko Thief of Crowns, a 3 mana Planeswalker, right? First of all, he is green and blue, so he would be affected by Fry. But immediately you may notice something. Oko comes in with 4 loyalty down here, right? Those 4 loyalty, well, that's pretty high. Especially if you keep in mind that he has a +2. Now, this +2 lets you create a food token. So this food token, we don't really need to spend too much time talking about, but it's essentially an artifact that has a very minor effect, but it can be used for various synergy effects. But the +2 makes it so Oko goes up to 6 loyalty immediately, putting him out of Fry range. He doesn't die to Fry. So the card that was put in the game to counter blue Planeswalkers can't kill Oko. First problem. Second problem. His second ability, target artifact or creature loses all abilities and becomes a green elk creature with base power and toughness 3/3. This may seem very, very similar to something like Heroes of Dominaria, put target non-permanent into its owner's library, throw it from the top, right? This is something where you grab an enemy creature and you just kind of get it away, right? Now, Oko's Thief of Crowns ability here, or I guess we can even look at Teferi Time Reveler, where it's like, take one creature and put it back into your opponent's hand, right? Kind of like get rid of it. Now, what Oko does is it doesn't fully remove it, but it turns it into a 3/3. Now, here's the problem though. You may notice it's not a minus ability. It's actually a +1, right? So this ability that functions as removal, turning a creature into a 3/3 elk, is actually a positive ability that continues to give Oko loyalty. Now, before we talk about the last ability, I really want to stress how effective this ability is. This right here are some cards that are currently in the Magic the Gathering metagame. There's Yarok the Desecrated, a 5 mana creature that lets you double up on effects. You've got Cavalier of Flame, again, a 5 mana creature that's got a huge power that can give all of your other stuff haste so they can come crashing in with maximum force immediately. You've got Feasting Troll King, which is a 6 mana, 7/6 creature that tramples into nothing, or like tramples into your opponent and can be resurrected for pretty much free. Alright, so he's kind of got 2 lives. The problem is, I'm sorry, I was actually wrong. Yarok, that's a 3/3 elk. Cavalier of Flame, oh, sorry, Cavalier of 3/3 elk. Feasting Troll King, I'm sorry, a feasting elk. Turns out, Oko turns everything into 3/3 elks, meaning that nothing matters anymore. You can't play big creatures because everything becomes an elk. Every single thing in the entire game that's supposed to be a powerful creature turns into a 3/3 elk. So any creature-based strategy is unusable against Oko. Like, I guess any big creature-based strategy, right? So what you can do is you can play lots of small creatures because then Oko just makes them more powerful. But you can't play big creatures anymore. If you want to play there's a 5-mana 10/10, right, which sounds scary. Well, it turns out it's a 5-mana 3/3 elk because everything becomes an elk. And the worst part about that is that Oko doesn't just turn them into elks and then, kind of like loses resources. Oko turns them into elk while generating resources. That's what makes this so broken, right? Now, do you want to know something else? Oko can also turn artifacts into elk. So not only are all creature-based strategies useless, but all artifact-based strategies are also useless because Oko can just turn them into elks without effects. Also, Oko's first ability creates a food token. Oko's second ability that creates elks out of artifacts, well, turns out that food tokens are artifacts. So even when your opponent doesn't have anything you want to shrink or anything that you want to use the effect on, you can actually just use the elk creation on your food tokens and create 3/3 elks that attack your opponent instead. You're not limited to only shrinking your opponent's stuff and taking their abilities away, but you can also take your weak, useless early game creatures or your free food tokens that Oko generates and then turn them into elk to start running into your opponent. Meaning that Oko not only generates endless resources because both of those abilities give him more loyalty, but he also completely invalidates all creature and artifact-based strategies while simultaneously turning his own stuff into more powerful creatures to defend and attack with. Now, we haven't even talked about his last ability. So Oko's last ability lets you exchange control of target artifact or creature you control on target creature and opponent controls with power 3 or less. So what you can do with Oko is you can create a food token. You can shrink your opponent's stuff to a 3/3 and then give your opponent the food token while taking their 3/3. So not only have you now made their units into elks, but now you're also stealing their elks while giving them useless shit that can't be used for anything other than like a minor amount of healing because food tokens aren't that useful unless you use them in a specific deck. So, this is what makes Oko so powerful, right? Where other Planeswalkers, right? Other Planeswalkers of similar nature require resources to be spent. Even Jace the Mind Sculptor required resources to be spent to be able to defend himself. Oko doesn't require resources to be spent. Oko generates resources while being able to defend himself. Now, the thing about Oko is that Oko is very clearly blatantly meant to be overpowered. Right? I'm going to go and just make that statement. I think Oko was intentionally made to be strong. And not just strong, but overpowered. Because the thing is that everybody in their right mind would put that second ability at a -1. But they decided to make it a +1 instead. So, let's talk about Mythic Championship 5. Mythic Championship 5 was the big tournament, $100,000 prize pool that was taking place right after Throne of Eldraine, including Oko, got released. Now, at Mythic Championship 5, we had this card right here, Field of the Dead, as well as Golos Tireless Pilgrim. These were kind of the big cards that everybody was paying attention to. Field of the Dead, what it does is when you have a lot of land in play, it lets you generate 2/2 zombies that you can use to attack your opponent with. What's strong about this is that if you have multiple Field of the Dead in play, you can generate upwards of 4, 8, 12 2/2 zombies every single turn. And if you keep in mind that players only have 20 life, attacking with 12 2/2 zombies, that's 24 damage. That kills really, really quickly. Golos Tireless Pilgrim worked very well with that, because what Golos Tireless Pilgrim does is it lets you search out a land from your library, meaning you can just straight up get these Fields of the Dead. You will never be in a situation where you don't have Field of the Dead available to you. So a lot of decks kind of looked like this, where there was a lot of lands in it. Then we had a lot of general kind of like ramping, meaning like having cards that let you get that land out very quickly. And then relying mostly on Golos Tireless Pilgrim and Field of the Dead to win by just spawning an endless amount of zombies. This was the deck that everybody was paying attention to. This was the deck that everybody thought was going to be the biggest part of the metagame. This right here is a general Oko list. This is the second thing that everybody was paying attention to, right? People were expecting this to show up, but it not to be as significant. Now, this is where we need to talk a little bit about food synergy. So Oko, Thief of Crowns. You can see him right here, right? He creates a food token. There's actually cards in the game that can use food tokens. So for example, Wicked Wolf is a creature that if you sacrifice a food token, you can give this guy +1/+1 and make him indestructible for a turn. Meaning that the Wicked Wolf essentially becomes an undestroyable wall, like an indestructible wall. You cannot get through this guy because if you attack, what Wicked Wolf will do will block, no matter how strong your creature is, although it's probably a 3/3 elk. Keep in mind, Oko makes all of your creatures 3/3 elks. But the Wicked Wolf will then just block and then eat a food token and become bigger as well as becoming indestructible, so you can't get rid of him. Oko constantly generating food tokens doesn't really help you against that, right? Like that just makes it even worse. It makes it so that there's constant supply for the Wicked Wolf to eat all of the food. And then there's also the Gilded Goose. The Gilded Goose can use food tokens to generate mana, meaning that there's a bunch of cards in this deck that you want to get out quickly. Hydroid Crisis and Questing Beast and Nissa Who Shakes the World. These are all win conditions. We don't need to get into too much detail on how they work exactly, but point being that they get a lot of value out of being played fast. So Gilded Goose, what you can do with it is you play Gilded Goose on turn 1. It generates a food which you can then next turn sacrifice to generate mana, which lets you play a turn 2 Oko. A turn 2 Oko then generates a food token, at which point you can use the Gilded Goose effect next turn with another land to play, like a Nissa for, well, actually, you can't play a Nissa then, but you can play a Questing Beast or Wicked Wolf, right? So you ramped yourself a little bit. But also, Oko is now sitting at 6 loyalty, making it basically impossible to kill Oko, because how are you going to deal 6 points of damage on turn 2? Keep in mind, the one counter card that is in the game that was meant to deal with Planeswalkers like this only deals 5 damage. You can't do it. It's not possible. So this is what the field of the competition ended up looking like, right? So these were the popular, these were the decks that people were bringing. We had 33% of the metagame be banned Golos. As I mentioned earlier, that's the Field of the Dead deck that everybody expected. But there was also a pretty substantial amount of Simic Food, which was the Thief of Crown decks. And then also Banned Ramp, which also uses Oko, Thief of Crowns. And then a bunch of other decks. So you can see the variety here is actually kind of decent in terms of like these lower decks here. Not too much Oko yet, but Banned Golos was absolutely overwhelming. Crazy amount, right? 33% of the metagame being a single deck, that's often seen as a problem. So, what ended up happening? Well, the top 8 ended up having only a single Golos deck in it. And instead, we had 4 different players, right? So, this is the one Golos deck. Banned Golos ended up getting second. Then we had Banned Aggro, Simic Aggro, Banned Planeswalker, and Simic Aggro. All 4 of those decks were Oko decks. So all 4 of them, like out of the, this right here condensed down to only a single deck making the top 8 that was playing Field of the Deck. And 4 decks of the top 8 were playing Oko. Now, the deck that ended up winning the tournament was actually a deck that was specifically built to just overpower those kind of decks and win quickly. So funnily enough, neither Banned Golos nor Oko ended up winning the tournament. But as a consequence to this tournament, Wizards of the Coast announced that they were going to ban a card, or they were going to do a new banning of cards, right? And a lot of people were kind of speculating that, or like we're kind of hoping that both Oko and Field of the Dead were going to get the stick. But nope, only Field of the Dead got banned. There's also Outcomes Astrolabe, but that's not really relevant to us. That's for a very specific, smaller format. Oko didn't get banned. Only Field of the Dead. So, what's the problem with that? Well, the metagame post-ban ended up developing quite a bit more. And you can see this right here is the metagame and the win rates of the Mythic Championship qualifier, which ended up taking place, I think, a week ago. And in here, post-ban, look at this. Sultai food, Simic food, banned food. This is 60% of the metagame. 60% of the metagame is Oko decks. And these are all, anything that has food in it is using Oko, because Oko can generate food like it's nobody's business while becoming unkillable. 60% of the metagame ended up being Oko. Because there's nothing else that is as strong, not even remotely close, right? Are the rest counter decks? A lot of the rest are counter decks. Now, funnily enough, right, a lot of the decks ended up including very similar lists. So you can see here, this is the most played cards in Standard right now, right? Standard, again, being the main format and the format where Oko is the most prevalent. The most played cards in Standard, in case you aren't familiar with Magic the Gathering too much, Magic the Gathering is a game that has 5 different colors. The colors are represented by these mana symbols here. You may notice that these mana symbols are awfully green right now. That's because, well, as it turns out, the top 10 most played cards in Standard are all green and blue. Now, you might say, okay, well, but Balmy, Oko isn't the most played card. That's because most people are only playing Oko or playing Oko counter decks, right? So Oko can't be the most popular cards because Oko gets countered by the Oko counter decks, right? So the entire metagame is only Oko and Oko counter decks. So we're going back to the memes here, right? But people don't play aggro. What they do is play Oko. But then the counter to Oko is a card called Noxious Grasp. But what people ended up doing, instead of playing like black decks, which Noxious Grasp is as a black card, right? Instead of playing black decks with Noxious Grasp, people just ended up adding Noxious Grasp into Oko decks. So now all of the decks are Oko decks that have Oko counter cards in it. So that's kind of where the meta is at right now. It's 60% Oko, and it's just getting worse. Now you might be like, okay. So, if this is just getting worse, I'm sure they'll ban it in the future. Well, here's the problem. They can't just wait. Because you gotta keep in mind that Magic the Gathering is a game that doesn't give its cards out for free, and there's a limited quantity of them. Oko is really expensive. A singular Oko will run you upwards of $70. One. Keep in mind the deck lists I was showing you earlier. They all included 4. One Oko will run you upwards of $70, right? And if you're lucky, you can get it more in the price range of $50. Now, the problem here is that the longer you wait, the more expensive everything becomes. Because Oko is so good that Oko isn't just played in Standard. Oko is played in all formats, in every single format. This right here is an Oath of Druids deck for Vintage. Now, this might not tell you anything, right? But let me just go ahead and pull this over here really quick so I can show this a bit better. But Vintage is the format where all cards are allowed. Well, pretty much all of them, right? Which includes cards like Black Lotus, right? And I'm sure even if you don't really know much about Magic the Gathering, you've heard of Black Lotus. And yes, this is a $17,000 price point, right? Like this is the actual price point here. Right? But even in Vintage, the most powerful format where you have cards like Ancestral Recall, where you have a 1 mana card that lets you draw 3 cards, or you have cards like Time Walk, which is a 2 mana spell that lets you take an extra turn, right? Even in this format, Oko is played in tournament-winning decks. That's how strong Oko is, right? Oko isn't passed up on, even in the most powerful, most insane format. This goes on. This right here is the standard meta game. So if you have a look at these costs here, right? The first deck here, $760. Simic Ramp, $679. Jund Adventures, the only deck that doesn't play Oko, is a lot cheaper, right? But Band Ramp, $773. The costs of these Oko decks are insane. But keep in mind, they are 60% of the meta game. But it's not only that. This right here is the modern meta game. Amulet Titan, well, guess who's in that deck? And guess how much that deck costs? People are buying Oko because Oko didn't get banned. So because Oko didn't get banned, people need Oko to be able to participate in tournaments because Oko is so overpowered that he's played in every single format without exception, meaning that the demand for him just rises, and guess what happens then? Oko becomes even more overpowered. Oko is the single most insane card in the game right now, and the community is imploding over it. People are, as I already showed you all of the memes, people want to ban Oko so damn badly, but Wizard hasn't done it yet, and Wizard hasn't done an announcement for another ban list. Why? Because at this stage, it's already out of control, right? What can they, if they ban it now, people have wasted their money, but that puts them into this really difficult situation. Is the longer they wait, the more expensive Oko becomes, and the longer they, and if they then eventually ban him, you know, like people are going to get even more upset, but they are already upset because they didn't ban him in the first place. This is just, it's just getting completely out of hand. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, that's why Oko is the Broko. Absolutely. All right. So that's kind of it. That's kind of it. So, oh, by the way, can I suggest Cardmark instead of eBay? And Oko is not an Amulet Titan. Oh, the list I saw has it in it. Okay, maybe he isn't an Amulet Titan. Point being that the shit is still really expensive, and Oko is played in decks that are in Modern. Like, this is 100% a thing. Can they not nerf him? How do you nerf a print card? Oko exists the way he exists. You can't really nerf a card that is like a physical product. How are you gonna do that? So anyway, at that note, I want to introduce you guys to our sponsor, which is the Scanimation app, this is not a real sponsor. This is just Wispy, who's like a homie and hangs out in chat, and he made a Kickstarter. And he made this little thing here, which I'm just going to kind of let it play. I'm going to put a link to this in the description if you're interested. All right. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about Oko. And you can hopefully this was interesting, right? I personally find this stuff fascinating, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. So I hope you found it interesting as well. All right. If you did, please let me know. And I will maybe make another video like this when a new topic arises. That's the thing. This is really very topic dependent. You know, like I need something to talk about for it to be interesting. Oh, I need something to talk about for this to really be like a thing. But this whole Oko situation, it's just fascinating to me, right? So what I think they should do is they should just ban Oko. Right? Like, Oko is insane because Oko is just going to become more and more of a problem. And they deliberately made a card overpowered to sell packs. Right? That's what happened. That's it. They decided to make him overpowered because they wanted to sell packs. Well, it turns out you made him too overpowered. That was your mistake. You should have made him a little less overpowered. Honestly, what they should have done is his second ability should be a 0 at the minimum if you want him to be overpowered. But it really should have been a -1, because in that scenario, what ends up happening is that you can play, like you have a creature on board, Oko comes down, turns it into an elk. Well, it turns out at that point, Oko has free loyalty, meaning the elk can't kill him. That would make it much more reasonable. right? Then Oko can't just turn something into an elk, and then the elk can't hurt Oko, at least not effectively. But now, instead, Oko turns something into an elk at a risk. That would be a lot more reasonable and a lot more manageable. But instead, we are left with this current disaster. And yeah, I guess that's it. So anyway, have a look at Wispy's Scanimation app, which is kind of cool, right? Like, I don't know. It's kind of neat. Have a look at it, right? Yeah, let me know what you think about the video. I'll see you guys tomorrow.